Hey y'all, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Morgan, and I do all things spooky here, but for this entire month, my goal has been to post nothing but videos of stories you guys have sent to me. So I think we're on like a week solid of that so far, maybe a little bit more. I'm having a blast, and I may do this just more after this month because it is so much fun, and you guys are sending me the scariest stuff. But with that being said, if you have any stories to send in that you think would fit this channel and you would like for me to read, please send them to the email in the description, and my other social medias will be there as well. But with that being said, let's get into these stories, shall we? I was drawn to your content more as a witch and an enthusiast of spooky and mysterious, but I also resonate with your videos because of folklore and stories of the experiences in the Appalachian Mountains. We were taught the same rules about the woods, fields, and rivers in the area that I once lived in. Because of this, I would like to share with you my realization that not everything is so easily explained. I'll give you one of my many stories, the one that sticks with me the most. If you would like more, let me know. I lived in the East Midlands of England, and I have always seen and been plagued by paranormal things since I was a very young child. But as I grew older, it became less and less frequent. I grew up in a smallish quarry town about a half-hour drive from the nearest city and town. There were forests and fields surrounding the town and old river that ran through the middle. It had been there before the town was even built. Our house was on a road with a cemetery about 200 meters from us. We could see it from our bedroom window, and the oldest gravestones were from a child in the 1600s. I must have been around 13 to 14 years old, and we had run out of something essential, meaning we had to go to the local shop. It was still open as it closed at 10 p.m. It must have been around 9:45, so we had to hurry. My late mom tasked me with taking my sister to go get the essential and come straight back. Every time we had to do this, these were the rules that she would rattle off to us before we left. Rule number 1, do not go into the cemetery no matter what you see or hear. Rule number 2, do not sing, whistle, or taunt in any way as you walk along these walls. Rule number 3, at the soonest possible instances, cross the road. Rule number 4, do not run as you walk along the walls of the cemetery. She told us this often, and I still remember it more than 10 years later. Like any rebellious teen, I thought it was a good idea to be loud and obnoxious as we walked down the road along the wall on the way to the shop. Nothing happened on the way there, and nothing would have happened on the way back either if I hadn't looked over the wall into the cemetery. On the grass path along the southeastern wall, I saw a feminine figure dressed in white. This path ran from the front of the small woods to the very back of the cemetery and stood 2/3 of the way up, staring right at me with hollow black eye sockets where her eyes should have been. I wanted to run, absolutely bolt for the last 2 minutes back home, but I heard my mom's voice and the last roll rang through my head. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched and that we were being followed. My mom was waiting at the door for us, and she looked at me with a seriousness that I didn't expect before she flat out asked me, "What did you do?" I tried my best to make excuses, but something about my mom at that moment made me not want to make her more upset, so I owned up to taunting and being disrespectful. I didn't know this at the time, but after my mother died in 2018, I found out that she had been a practicing witch for 20 years before I was born. She could see and sense things that most couldn't. From that point on, I became keenly aware of nearly every ghost and entity in that graveyard wandering around, and the 3 that lived in my house. Again, if you wish for more stories, let me know. I love your content and wish you all the best. You saw a lady in white? Oh, that's terrifying. Anytime I hear lady in white stories, I think of La Llorona. And I know there's different ones everywhere. There's a lot of stories of the lady in white in the States, but I always think of La Llorona, and I am terrified of her. I have been terrified of her since I saw that episode of Supernatural when I was a child. It never left. So you were telling me this story. Oh my God, when you were saying the rules, chill bumps. They're so similar to the Appalachian rules. Oh, it was fantastic. Please send me the rest of those stories. Oh. Alright, next story. When I was in high school, my family and I lived in this beautiful red brick house. My mother and stepdad never told us that the owner died in the attic before we moved in. About a month after we moved in, I got home from school and I went to my room to do my homework before my brothers and sisters got home. I closed my door, and a few minutes later, I heard heavy footsteps coming from down the steps. I heard a door open, and then my doorknob rattled and the door opened. I get out of my bed and look down the hall, but I don't see anything. I close my door and go back to my homework, and a few minutes later the knob rattled and the door opens again. I jump up and run to my door and still see nothing. So I yell, "I'm gonna tell Mom when she gets home," and slam my door and lock it. And I sit on the foot of my bed, and the knob rattles and the lock turns and the door opens. I run into the hall and scream that I'm telling Mom. I slam my door as hard as I can and lock it. I stand right by the door and wait. A few minutes go by and the knob rattles. I grab the knob and fling the door open and yell, "Ah, caught you." But there was no one there. I run down the hall and look at my brother's room, empty. I go to my sister's room and again, empty. I ran out of the stairs, out of the front door, and over to my aunt's house and tell her and my uncle that there's someone in the house. My uncle runs over and searches the whole house, but there was no one. The way that is so creepy to me, that you were standing right beside of that door, opened it, and there was still no one. There's still nobody there. Like, you confirmed that there was nothing there. I don't know if that makes me feel better or worse, because, like, what's the alternative? You seeing, like, just an entity there? I guess it's better to see nothing, but, like, alright, next story. Kitties. Sorry if you guys hear random, like, scratching and stuff. My cats are in such a little playful mood. Hi, Pete. Right on time. What are you doing, baby? I live in Atlantic Canada, if that gives you any idea of what advice to give. I'm writing this looking for some advice to deal with specifically the 5th and 6th stories, but would like to apologize in advance if this gets too long. I just want to share all of my experiences with someone and was hoping for some advice if you don't mind. I'm a huge fan of yours and watch your videos on both YouTube and TikTok, and have been debating on sending these stories in since I learned you took follower stories. Yay! But recent happenings, as well as you sharing all of the stories, have pushed me to now want to finally send this and hopefully get some advice. Now on to these stories. I've numbered and given them all titles so you can tell the difference better. Story number 1, The Attic. This was some years ago and takes place at my dad's house. All but 2 or 3 takes place there. I was probably around 8 or 9 when it started. I'm now well into my teens. I would be in my bedroom day or night watching my TV, and all of a sudden hear something scratching at the ceiling or dragging itself across the area above me. My dad would regularly be up in the room right beside of me and claim that he didn't hear anything, even when it was happening in those moments, except when I made him come into my room. We both believe it was an animal, or we had some issues of rodents in the house, to this day, but upon investigation of the attic, it's just insulation. We poked around a bit and there was no signs of an animal or anything. We even had an exterminator come and there was no signs. The dragging and scratching continues until around 2 years ago when I got into witchcraft and cleansed. This is probably my most easily explained story, in my opinion. Story number 2. Friends' experiences. This is kind of a compilation of experiences friends and I had at my dad's house. The first experience we had when I was in the bathroom, and the 2 of them were in the kitchen. When I came out, they asked me if I'd called for them from the bathroom, and when I told them no, they told me that they both heard a woman that sounded exactly like me calling them. It sounded like it was coming from the back porch near the bathroom, hence why they assumed it was me. We quickly headed upstairs to my room. The same time, but in the morning, while me and friend 1, we'll call him Angel, were asleep, friend 2, we'll call her Jade, claims to have heard the radio downstairs come on. And it didn't just come on, it came on very loudly, out of nowhere, even though my dad was still in bed, according to her, as it was probably 5 or 6 in the morning on a Saturday. Story number 3. Mom's house. Few things have happened at my mom's house, but there were 3 occurrences that have happened there that I think are worth mentioning. One of them will be separate, as I think it deserves its own section. The first thing that happened here, her and her boyfriend had just left to drive him home. It was probably 10 o'clock at night, and I heard him call downstairs whenever he needed help with something, even though I had just watched them leave. So I quietly stopped what I'm doing in the main area of the house, no curtains anywhere, and calmly went to my room and locked the door behind me. The second thing that happened also revolved around hearing her boyfriend call me to come outside, but the time I had just gotten back home from school and was pretty certain he was not on the property. But I FaceTimed him just to see, because I knew he would answer if he was able to. He did answer, and I can see that he was at his own home 40 minutes away. I explained to him what was happening, but he swore that he wasn't on the property. Well, obviously he wasn't from the FaceTime. He had definitely not called me outside or been there without me knowing. I've heard both him and my mom on the property since, but I have very purposefully ignored it, moving away from any curtain windows. I also walk a straight line into the woods towards the river behind my home, which usually has taken around 5 to 10 minutes, but I never reach it because I was walking way longer than I should be. So I turn around and walk straight out, except to end up somewhere in the woods that I've never been before. It ended up taking me more than an hour to find my way out, which is very strange because I had been out to that river before. I've even been since, and this didn't happen. That one isn't as strange, but I figured I would include it. That one is strange. So that makes me think, both of these stories together, that something at your mom's house was in those woods just outside, because the mimicky situation in the house is something that the things in the woods really do well at. So that would make sense, especially if it was trying to get you outside, and it seems like that's what's happening. It's coming from outside, and you losing your way and also losing time in the forest is also something they do. So you said you got into witchcraft, so I'm sure you know what to do now. Putting up iron outside helps keep that property safe. Using protection on yourself and things like that will also help. I would also recommend, if you don't do this, lining windows and door frames with black salt, because that will help keep it outside. But the iron helps keep it off of your property. Never put salt or black salt or anything directly on the ground. As much as you think it would help, it probably would, but like, it damages the soil, so never do that. Iron stakes are a lot better, or something like that, on the property. Story number 4, Angel's house. Angel, the same friend from one of the earlier stories, was one of my best friends, and I stayed over at their house 3 times. There were 2 times that something weird happened during. There are things that are backstory on the house that would explain some things, but I'm not sharing them as I'm not currently in contact with them to ask permission. I don't want to risk letting details slip on their identity. The first time I stayed over, as we were laying in the bed starting to settle in, not near sleeping but trying to start the process, I got the urge to look over at the door and made eye contact with a shadow figure that was at least as tall as the ceiling. It had no facial features or defining characteristics, but it was darker than the entire rest of the room and so clearly human-shaped. I ended up having to firmly tell it to get the fuck out in order to get it out of the room after trying different ways of telling it to get out. I found out the 3rd time that I was over that Angel's brother had been having almost constant experiences like that since the family had moved in. The 3rd time I was over, obviously I found out about the thing with her brother, but I also got a chill that would not go away to the point that my teeth were heavily chattering even after being wrapped in multiple blankets. I would keep seeing figures in their living room window that led to the porch-like area. I was sitting on their kitchen floor talking with them and their brother while they had us make dinner, and we were all talking about weird things that had happened to us. All of a sudden, I hear a man's voice from the top of the stairs, even though the 3 of us were the only ones in the house. I mentioned it, and their brother said that I probably just heard the radio that maybe their parents had left on. I believed that until I went upstairs to use the bathroom, bringing Angel with me so I wasn't alone. We go upstairs and the radio was not on. I just kind of gave them a look of fear and hurried to use the bathroom. They waited outside the door for me, and when I got out, they requested we quickly get to the room or downstairs, just away from their parents' bedroom, which was directly parallel to the bathroom. I decided on their bedroom so I could put my pajamas on before we went back downstairs. Once in the room, Angel told me that they basically had a stare-off with a shadow figure in their parents' bedroom that was standing by the far side of the parents' bed, just standing there watching. Once I came out of the bathroom, it was gone. That was all the major things I remember happening there, other than a few homophobic comments on a Spirit Box app. That is definitely spooky. Shadow figures, yeah, man, there's something. They're really alarming to see. I wish you could give me the rest of the details, but I totally understand. I don't want you to invade anyone's privacy like that. All right, next story. Story number 5, night occurrences. This is another story from my mom's house. It happened 2 weeks ago at the time I'm sending this email. I'm an insomniac, so I'm often up late in the night and the early hours of the morning. Well, one night it was probably around 5 or so when things were starting to lighten outside. I got up to go to the washroom and afterwards suddenly felt extremely thirsty, so I went to the kitchen to fill up a glass of water and happened to glance out the window above my sink. As I was waiting for the water to get cold, all I saw was pitch black, no outlines of trees or anything in the area outside, which was strange because even when it's dark, I tend to be able to see at least a little bit. I happened to glance out due to a small solar light, but it's just pitch black. Suddenly, I get the worst pit in my stomach, and I had to fight the urge to run back to my room. Instead, I calmly, as I could, filled up my glass of water and drank it before calmly going back to my room, glancing at another window as I went to see that it was light outside in that one. The next night, I got thirsty again and dreaded getting up, and did anyways because my room's always warm and cold water sounded appealing. I didn't even look out the window this time. I was firmly down or somewhere else in the room. But I got hit with the worst pit in my stomach, fight or flight feeling like the night before. I haven't really left my room at night at my mom's house since, but would really appreciate any advice you have to offer on what to deal with the situation. So I do think it's kind of what I told you before, that I think there's something in the woods at your mom's house. Iron stakes, black salt on the windows. Make sure you put protections on yourself because something's definitely trying to lure you outside. Something in those woods has taken an interest to you, which is not fun. So I think that'll help. And just doing kind of what you've been doing, keeping your head down, ignoring it, not acknowledging it, staying calm, that will also help. Story number 6, footsteps home alone. This is my final story and takes place at my dad's again. I'm often home alone at my dad's because of his work, getting called out for work when he's on call, visiting friends, or going out on his motorcycle. I have always had weird experiences in this house. The previous story, shadow figures, voices, something that looked like my dad, etc. But recently it's gotten a lot worse. It chilled out for a year, but now it's ramped up again. Now when I'm home alone, I can distinctly hear someone walking around and tapping on things either upstairs or downstairs. I've even heard something get on and off my dad's bed, which is its own level of terrifying. It's gotten worse as of last night. I can hear something distinctly walking around downstairs or going up and down the stairs, and while it's upstairs, I can hear it come up to my door and stop outside. And during this time, I know my dad is in bed. Our door is both loudly open so you can hear him get up and walk around the house from the other room. I've even gotten out of my room as quietly as possible and checked his room only to find him sound asleep. I've always gotten an awful feeling about going downstairs late at night by myself to use the bathroom or get a snack or drink. I often hear something follow me up the stairs once I'm back in my room. It's just gotten worse as of recent. I've also occasionally heard both my dad's and my own voices when he's not home. Obviously, I'm not in another room. I'd love any advice you or members of your community have to give, or how to stop this or figure out why it's happening. Thank you so much for reading this if you did. I just figured it wouldn't hurt to share my stories and maybe get some advice in the process. I'm so sorry this is long. I didn't realize it until I went back and reread it. Thank you so much for potentially reading and posting these. It wasn't that long, actually. Like, that was a good length story. So my advice, okay. So you've got something in that house. The fact that it's making noise and all that, I don't really feel like whatever's in your dad's house is like inherently negative, but if it's scaring you, it doesn't need to be there. So I would recommend cleansing that space if you haven't already, putting up protections in that house. It wouldn't hurt to line black salt at that house either, on the window seals. Keep some protection jars around you, I think. I think cleansing will do a world of good, and I have a video on that. I'm sure you know how to do it. You said you've been into witchcraft, but I do have a video, and I can link it in the description of this one, just so you can look at it if you want to. At least maybe we do things differently when we cleanse, and you can get some new ideas with mine. All right, next story. I live in the UK, but I'm from Bangladesh. My cousin lives in a town that is very close to where a historic battle took place. Story 1. As I said, her house is very close to a battleground, so we tend not to go out during the night in fear. Last year or so, we were at her house watching movies at night in her living room. Her living room has these glass open table doors leading out to her garden and woods behind. She let her dog out to pee quickly. Instead of peeing, she stared into the woods and started barking very loudly. She tried to calm her down and bring her inside, but she wouldn't budge and kept on barking at something in the woods. After a few minutes, we got the dog inside and we closed the glass door. We put the curtains down, and after a few seconds, we heard barking from outside. It was the exact same bark that she did. We shut the movie, didn't speak for a while. My cousin went to lock the glass doors quickly, but 5 minutes later we heard tapping on that door, like the tapping sounds a dog would make if it was asking to be let inside. This continued to happen until 5 in the morning when the sun rose. Throughout the night the tapping got louder, and then quieter, and then louder again. It was really scary, and they moved shortly after because they kept on getting dead animals like skunks and once even another dog right outside their garden fence. Ooh. Story number 2. My family and I go to Bangladesh every few years, and this happened when I was 12. We went to the country part of Bangladesh to visit some aunts and uncles, and on our 3rd night sleeping there, I heard loud bangs on the window. They're made of wood, but they're pretty sturdy. It woke both me and my sisters and cousins and mother, who were sleeping in the same room. Continuously, it would pound and talk in a distorted voice like it was trying to copy someone who wasn't alive, if you get what I mean. It was saying things like, "Let me in, I'm insert relative's name," in this disgustingly low-pitched, mangled voice. It would change up with who it was after a while, and the voice would then try to mimic that relative's voice. After a long while, about an hour or so, it went to our uncle's house, which isn't very far away, and it would start doing the same thing. It was gone after half an hour or so, but we didn't hear from it again, although there were a few animal disappearances, so yeah, I don't know if that had something to do with that. Overall in my life, I've had a lot of scary instances. How do I get rid of them or make them less worse? Thank you, and I hope you had fun reading these. I'm welcome to share more of them. Yes, please share more of them. I think putting some protections on yourself that align with your faith and your beliefs would really help you. It seems like you are just really open to those experiences. Some people are. Some people just experience more things than others. But yeah, that would be my advice. I think you need to protect yourself. But those stories are really creepy. The fact that the one specific one, it was like messing with your windows and then you guys didn't react, so it tried another house, that's really creepy. And you're probably right that the animal disappearances do have something to do with it, unfortunately. Okay, I think we got time for one more story, so let's get into it. My story doesn't take place in the US, and I can't prove that it's more than just my gut feelings, but here it is. I was in India in the beginning of 2020 to visit my family, and some of my family lived in the old section of the city. This area has a large wooded area for military training, and from what I understand, many of the longtime residents and families are Muslim. Before the city became a tech hub, this area was one of the first areas that was built up to become the city it is. My family member's apartment has a small balcony outside of the guest room which overlooks the edge of this area. It was fairly warm, so they kept the doors open and dried clothes out there. Well, one night I was closing the door to the balcony, and I remember thinking about how some people recite Bismillah before they close doors as to stop any entities who want to enter as they close the door. I didn't know that. That's interesting. I learned this from some friends who had interactions with jinn, and even had their own jinn, who they accept as part of their lives, who generally protect them and can be somewhat mischievous. This friend's jinn has been malevolent to guests, treating the guests as an intruder when they were spending the night. This thought flashed in my head, and I quickly shooed the thought away, locked the door, and went to sleep. Well, in my nightmare, it was as if I was being targeted and harmed. Then I would wake up and try to sleep, and again the same nightmare would occur in a different fashion. I've had nightmares before, but they've never continued this way. I tried to recite some mantras I knew from growing up just to get my mind off of it, but the feeling never left. It was around 4 in the morning, and desperately, I called a friend in the US to ask if they could recite something to cast it away. I put the phone on speakerphone, and my friend recited a prayer, and I immediately felt better and could sleep. Thank goodness for that person. I don't blame this entity for doing what I believe was protection for specific groups of people. It definitely just freaked me out. For more background on jinn, they exist both culturally and religiously. They're cited in the Quran as creatures that exist alongside humans that are made from fire. Like humans, they have capacity for good and evil. And for recent context, in this time in India before COVID, there were laws that were said to be passed that which were largely discriminatory against Muslims, who were already being targeted and discriminated against. There is more to this story that I'm happy to share. The night I came to that city, many in the city were participating in both vigils for those who had been lost to Islamophobia. There was protesting during the day, and finally my family isn't from this city. They've moved there in adulthood. Hope this is cohesive, but feel free to edit. Also, great channel. Thank you. Thank you so much for giving the facts about jinn. I've always been really interested in jinn and wanting to sit and learn about them, but they scare me. So I haven't really dove into research, so it was really interesting reading about it. So thank you for that. Thank you so much to everyone that has sent me a story. I love doing these. Please send me in your stories, and I will see you tomorrow.